On Saturday, August 29, hundreds of protesters in Berlin attempted to storm Germany's parliament building, the Reichstag, amid demonstrations against coronavirus restrictions. An estimated 38,000 people had gathered in front of the Reichstag, the Brandenburg Gate, and the Victory Column to protest against the use of masks, lockdown restrictions, and the government's overall response to the pandemic, even though Germany has fared exceedingly well in comparison to other Western European nations. The protesters were comprised of various outfits, calling in a mix of anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists, and coronavirus skeptics. But there was also significant representation from some of Germany's far-right groups. Including members from the Reichsbürger movement that doesn't recognize a post-World War II German government and identify with certain imagery and symbolism adopted by Germany's far right since the Nazi swastika was outlawed. Seeing the German imperial flag bandied about by far-right protesters on the Reichstag steps came as a shock to many, especially as the building has endured a colorful history of violence during the rise of Nazi Germany in the lead-up to World War II, when it was actually set on fire and eventually abandoned until the reunification of East and West Germany, after which the Reichstag was renovated and reinstated as the official parliament building, becoming a symbol of democracy in modern Germany.
Rechtsextremistische Pöbeleien und Gewalt bei der Demonstration am vergangenen Samstag in Berlin haben zu Recht viele Menschen erschreckt und empört. Wir werden solche Ausschreitungen nicht hinnehmen. Wer auf den Straßen den Schulterschluss mit Rechtsextremisten sucht, aber auch wer nur gleichgültig neben Neonazis, Fremdenfeinden und Antisemiten herläuft, wer sich nicht eindeutig und aktiv abgrenzt, macht sich mit ihnen gemein.
So questions were raised about how this protest that was organized for anti-vaxxer and coronavirus conspiracy groups morphed into a violent demonstration for Germany's far right. In an interview with The Telegraph, Michael Ballweg, the organizer of the demonstration, distanced himself from the ordeal, stating that the far-right representation had nothing to do with his Querdenken initiative, which is dedicated to campaigning against Germany's coronavirus response. In fact, their website opens with the following: "We are Democrats. Right-wing extremists, left-wing extremists, fascists, and inhuman ideas have no place in our movement. The same applies to any kind of violence." So perhaps the demonstration was infiltrated by far-right voices in hopes of capitalizing on the anti-government hysteria. And the lead-up to the events on August 29 do suggest that certain groups were reportedly calling on their members to both stage and attend protests against the government. Groups such as the Identitarian Movement, a far-right initiative that believes in maintaining the purity of German and Western European bloodlines and is also fiercely opposed to immigration. The National Democratic Party, which is widely regarded as a neo-Nazi organization, and the Third Path, which is identified as an ultranationalist, far-right political party founded in neo-Nazi ideologies. These are just some of the groups that have German politicians and policymakers fearful of homegrown, far-right terrorism and radicalization. In fact, since Europe's migrant crisis in 2015, which saw Germany take in over 1 million refugees, the nation has seen a significant rise in far-right political voices, including that of the Alternative for Germany Party, or the AfD, which has now become the leading opposition party in the Bundestag, even though nearly a third of its members were once aligned with the extreme right faction, the Wing, before it was allegedly dissolved in April. Along with holding fast to their anti-immigration rhetoric, the Wing attempted to play down some of the atrocities committed by the Nazis.
Wer Geschichte säubert, zerstört unsere Identität. Ja, wir haben uns mit den Verbrechen der 12 Jahre auseinandergesetzt. Und deshalb, liebe Freunde, haben wir auch das Recht, uns nicht nur unser Land, sondern auch unsere Vergangenheit zurückzuholen. Haben wir das Recht, stolz zu sein auf die Leistungen deutscher Soldaten in 2 Weltkriegen.
The AfD's rise to power has coincided with an increasingly polarized political climate since the 2015 migrant crisis and an emboldened far-right voice in Germany. So much so that there have been assassination attempts on politicians from the left, representatives have been stabbed, and a councilman even had his car blown up. Last June, pro-refugee politician Walter Lübke was assassinated on the terrace of his own home by a far-right extremist. In October 2019, a man who was reportedly self-radicalized on the internet opened fire on a synagogue during Yom Kippur prayers and attacked workers at a kebab restaurant, killing 2 people. And on February 19 this year, a homegrown far-right extremist fired upon 2 shisha bars in the town Hanau with the intention of cleansing Germany of migrants. 9 people died in the shootings, and when the killer returned home, he shot his own mother and took his own life. But the coronavirus pandemic has tempered some of the polarization in the political sphere, with recent polls revealing that only 9% of Germans support the protests against government lockdown measures. And only 1 in 10 Germans are against virus prevention measures, such as wearing masks in public spaces. In fact, almost 80% of Germans said they would like to see stronger compliance with coronavirus measures, with 28% saying they would prefer even stricter measures to be enforced. Meanwhile, support for the AfD, which has struggled to establish a uniform position on the pandemic, has dropped significantly in national polls to just 10%. So, perhaps with an increasingly muted voice in the Bundestag, and the majority of Germans throwing their support behind Merkel's administration for how it has been handling the pandemic, Germany's far right may look to co-opt other movements and rallies that express anti-government sentiments to gain further support. The storming of the Reichstag on August 29 may not have just been a one-off event, but rather the culmination of far-right fringe members trying to pull themselves back into the mainstream.